SRAM's latest red group is out today. In this video, I'm going to tell you about all the latest and greatest, what's new, what's neat, what's notable, how it compares to Shimano Red AXS Di2, what it's like to ride, and give you the take of a veteran pro mechanic on how the group functions, how it's like to build the thing up. There's a lot of new stuff going on here, a lot of tweaks, a lot of refinements, some shaving of weight as you would expect. The big story, in my mind, is the complete overhaul of the lever, not just for ergonomics and aesthetics, but also added functionality. Please take a second to subscribe, that helps me out. And now we will dig in to what's new with the new SRAM Red. Typically, brands will release the new on the top end thing, and then that will trickle down to the second, the third tier things. SRAM flipped that script with its force group, the second tier group, and reduced the size of the hood on that, which left the old Red looking a little clunky with its silo-sized upper on the front of the hood. The new hood addresses that, taking the cylinder from on top to running lengthwise in the grip of the hood. There's also just tons of clearance for your fingers, which I love. And the levers flare out on the sides. If you're watching this video, I'm guessing you know how SRAM works. The right lever, single press, moves the rear derailleur down into harder and harder gears. The left lever, single press, moves the derailleur into an easier, larger gear. You press them together, and that shifts your front derailleur, both up and down. What's new is the little thumb lever button, which can either be programmed to shift the derailleurs or, what I think is cool, to drive the hammerhead, and then you can configure what exactly it's doing. Whether it's moving through different screens, which is pretty standard, or you can set it to jump to a particular page, to start a lap, to start a workout, to jump ahead in a workout interval, or to zoom in or zoom out on the map. Shimano has had buttons on its Di2 for a while. SRAM was missing them, and this was a big jump forward. Another jump, maybe not forward, but at least up to the modern era, Hammerhead now has an app. Welcome to 2014, Hammerhead. Hammerhead has been basically like an Android phone for a while, and that the clarity of the screen has been phenomenal, but it's been behind in many other ways. The predictive climbing feature, which Wahoo has now matched with the Element computers, was Hammerhead's, in my mind, primary differentiator of something cool that nobody else had. That works the way many computers work when you have a route loaded in, and it will tell you what climb is coming up and give you a color-coded gradient. The predictive climbing, as the name implies, shows a climb coming up when you're not following a route. It'll just see where you're riding and then guesstimate if you're going to continue on in that way and give you a heads up on the climb. So that's a cool feature. So let's get this group on a bike, then we'll talk more about what's new, how it works, and how it compares to Shimano Red AXS Di2. I've ridden and worked on every iteration of SRAM Red since it first came out, but that's always been in a sample size of 1 or maybe 2 or 3 on different test bikes, because I have no bike shop. Jim Potter, however, the owner of Vecchio's, has worked on thousands of bikes over the years. So I hired him to do a couple things. One, install the group for me while I was at Sea Otter and then riding in Portugal. And then 2, give me his take on what it was like to install and how it compares to groups from Campagnolo, Shimano, and all the thousands of bikes he's worked on over the years. Oh, get white electrical tape to finish off the bar tape. That's sharp.
Yeah, I wanted to make it look.
That's sharp.
You look okay.
Jim, thanks for putting this together. This looks fantastic, down to the
welcome.
finishing touches of the white electrical tape to finish off the white bar tape.
Sure.
Love it. What was the experience like installing this compared to the thousands of bikes you've put together and worked on over the years?
Pretty straightforward. It's, as we now know, this is the latest, greatest SRAM Red group, AXS. And it went together very good. The ease of hooking up the drivetrain is the same as ever. Hold a couple buttons, lights blink, everything's dialed in, so that's very good. Running the hydraulic lines actually a little easier than in the past because it's a solid mount in the lever now, as opposed to that little hose that came up that you had to hold with one lever while you tighten the ferrule down. just runs right in, so nice and quick and easy, no complaints. I think that's a better, quicker system for attaching the hydro lines. So the componentry is great, and the frame was easy to work with. There's plenty of room inside the NV bar stem for your hydro lines, and it wasn't very hard to get those through. So yeah, the build was pretty straightforward.
Internal routing looks beautiful.
Sure.
There's a lot of this on the internet, as there always is with all subjects, about, okay, that's all fine and good, but when it comes time to work on it, now we got to pay the piper.
Yeah.
What do you tell customers when they're coming in with bikes like this about how much it can add potentially to service, like if and when you need to swap out the headsets?
It's highly variable. So, for example, I just put this very same, not as pretty as yours, but a very same NV one-piece bar stem on a customer's bike. And I had to ask them 3 or 4 times, are you sure you've got the right stem length? Are we sure about this? You're dialed, because this is kind of it. Yeah, I think I'll be good. And we were coming off a 2-piece NV with the internal. So I was a little concerned that we might have issues with the length of the brake lines and so forth. Luckily, he went to a narrower bar, so we didn't have to change the hydraulic lines. But what used to be literally a 5-minute job can now be a couple or more hour job, depending on what has to happen. In the case of a shorter stem, narrower bar, we clip the cable, we put new olive and barb on, run it in, everything's fine. Just feeding it back through the bar, it can take another hour of time. If we're going to a longer stem and a wider bar, and now we have to replace the hydraulic lines in the bike, now we're talking many-hour job. Because not only do we have to drop this down and out and put a new line in, we have to get a new line through the frame, which sometimes means getting into the bottom bracket. So it's almost a complete bike disassembly to go to a different stem length or bar width. So yeah, from a mechanic standpoint, it's the chatter with other mechanics is everything from this is the most ridiculous thing ever to, hey, we can charge more money. And it's just somewhere in between. Yeah, we have to get paid for our time, and it does cost more to do. And I think for a high-end customer that appreciates what they're getting and they know what they're getting into, if they're spending $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a bicycle, a few $100s to change something is maybe kind of understood.
Sure.
But for some of the off-the-rack bikes that are, maybe not as high dollar, but they're trying to look the part, that can be a bit of a disservice for a customer when they realize that, oh, I just want a 1 centimeter longer stem and it's going to cost me what? So yeah, it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's so F1 looking, it's just fantastic. But yeah, there is a cost of ownership involved in that, and we do have to brace the customer that it can be an expensive fix.
Sure. Yeah. How about SRAM versus Shimano? What's your preference for riding? What's your preference for working on? And then also, what do you see in terms of service of parts failing or breaking or just needing to be warrantied? How did the 2 brands stack up there for you? Well,
obviously this past year we had a bit of an issue with Shimano cranks. I'm never a fan of the Dub crank bolt. Sorry about that, but that thing can get awfully damn tight.
Yes.
And so before I built your bike, this was disassembled and heavily greased and put back together, just for down the road issues.
I've got a 6-foot piece of pipe that I keep in the garage just for leverage to take said bolt out sometimes.
Bolts, yeah. No, I'll be honest. Early days, I was not a super fan of some of the SRAM stuff. This goes way back to some of their first Red, but boy, it's really good these days. We do a lot of force access wide on the moots. To me, one of the nicest things that they've done over the years is the brakes just have a much snappier, more linear feel than they used to. I used to think the brakes felt kind of vague and like the start point was kind of off. But God, they feel super snappy now. They bleed super easy. The bleeding edge, it's easy to bleed the things. Here or there with the DOT fluid, I understand why they use it. I kind of prefer the mineral oil, but that's just, that's just me, I guess.
Shimano has mineral oil. SRAM uses DOT.
DOT for the majority. They do have some mineral on some some mountain bike stuff now, which is interesting. But no, it works fantastic. Shifting is really good. Front shifting is obviously something that's been improved over the years. Great durability out of these flat top chains. Ever so slightly larger roller. Nice and meaty. Yeah, it's very good stuff. When it comes to SRAM versus Shimano versus Campagnolo, Our little shop is...
Campagnolo still exists.
Oh, yeah, we got them. Yeah,
Not just for the museum.
Yeah, right. We're known as a bit of a campy-centric shop, and that's fine. We do work on a lot of campy stuff. But I'll be honest, I'm fairly agnostic when it comes to componentry. It all works good. They all have their pluses and minuses. But at the end of the day, the derailleurs move the chain side to side, the brakes slow your bike down. They all have their thing. And so, but yeah, the SRAM has come along. I think they've made the biggest improvements and the biggest strides, I think, over all the brands. Really, really solid stuff.
Speaking of braking, this is the first road lever to have a push cylinder instead of the pull cylinder up top. Is that something that affects the power or the modulation of braking?
That I wouldn't know.
Like, this feels good in the hands. Like, what I've noticed most is just the shape of the thing.
Yeah,
you know, like, I'm sure you could probably measure with a stopwatch like the timing and such of the shifting, but what I notice is just the contact points, how it feels like. You get my my entire hand wrapped around the thing. That feels nice. Braking feels great here and there.
Yeah, the ergonomics have definitely changed on the lever. It's got a different appearance to it. I think it looks better on the bike than it did off the bike. It's a sharp looking kit, but you know, I don't know yet, having not done anything other than ride around the block after I built it, you know, what the long-term ergonomics and how it's going to feel. But yeah, I think they've done a good job of mapping out where things need to be, and yeah, it feels. It looks like it's going to be a very comfortable ergonomic piece of kit. As far as the braking power, where the master cylinder is, boy, I wouldn't know. That's above my pay grade.
How about having to adjust shifting? One thing I appreciate about electronic, there's you know, pros and cons of mechanical versus electronic, is that once it's set, there's no cables to stretch or things to futz with. Do you have customers, you know, knocking a derailleur that needs adjustment? Or?
Yeah, derailleur hangers, obviously the first thing to bend when you fall over. You know, they've done a pretty good job with a little wedge in behind here to kind of keep this thing nice and centered. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of this electronic stuff is that classic set it and forget it. You dial it in, you get your limit screws. If you know, in the case of this bike, we do have limit screws on both derailleurs. And you set it in, you fine tune it, you know, instead of a barrel adjuster here, you hold the lever and you do little micro clicks and you get it set in, and it's good. It holds for a nice long time. Now, if the thing takes a blow, obviously, you know, we got to realign hangers and maybe have to go through it again. But we've had many bikes where the hanger is bent, we replace the hanger, and it just remembers where it was, and it's perfect. It just goes right back on. So, no, it is nice and easy, no cable stretch, and going back to modern stuff here, taking a shift cable, you know, all the way through. Any bend in a shift cable is going to create drag. It's going to create a situation where, in time, the lining of the housing will wear, and whatever coating is on the cable will wear, and you will get drag. And these things are so finicky. We got 12 or up to 13 in the back now. It has to be super smooth. Well, electronic obviously gets rid of all that. You know, the Luddite in me really misses cables, and you know, it's that pulls this, moves this, totally analog, do this, and it works. But man, this stuff stays in tune really well, and you don't have that degradation over time that you would get with mechanical cables. So yeah, it works really good.
Any thoughts on wireless versus wired? Again, SRAM versus
Shimano. The Shimano wired-less is great. The biggest hang-up for me, and I just had to do this with a time trial bike with Campagnolo EPS on extensions and base bars and all that wiring that has to go through a handlebar and through a stem is really, if we can eliminate that, great. So SRAM right from the get-go eliminated it with wireless. Shimano just 2 wires, so that's most frames very easy to get 2 wires through the frame. Almost everything is plumbed for that these days. But yeah, the wireless I think is the way to go. And doubling back to, you know, my old friends at Campagnolo, the EPS group, that one could be kind of finicky, you know, because of patents and limitations, you know, having to hardwire things into the solder into the motors and so forth. It wasn't very modular. If you had a wire issue, it was kind of a big deal. So eliminating wires doesn't hurt my feelings, as far as especially trying to run stuff through some interesting handlebar shapes. So yeah, I'm fine. The less, the better.
One last question, then I will get out of your hair, and let's get back to your day. What is SRAM like to deal with on the back end as the owner of a bike shop as far as
Super easy.
Okay.
Super easy. Yeah, they're
Getting replacement parts or whatever.
very, very good. Yeah, we had a situation here recently where they definitely went above and beyond for someone that, it wasn't a warranty. It was just they had damaged something and we wanted to find a replacement part, and they went above and beyond to get this guy a new part. That was just not readily available. So they've always been very good at that regard. So yeah, that's they're quite good at this stuff, and the improvements. Again, every year, transmission now on the mountain bike side, this new stuff, everything is good. They're making strides. Every time they change a group, it's noticeable. It's not like, oh, they put a stripe down the side of the crank. They've made some improvements to the group. So it's it's very good stuff and good company to work with.
Yeah, good stuff indeed. Thanks for the insight. Thanks for the professional job on the build.
Have fun with it.
Appreciate you. I will. Now fast forward a few weeks and a few hundred miles, I've put on my Envy with the new group and another bike that I can't tell you about for a few weeks. I've done solo rides, I've done group rides, even snuck in a sweet ride on the Colorado National Monument, which is absolutely bucket list if you have not ridden there before. Now let's dig into the details, the notable bits about the group. I'll tell you what I like, what I don't like, and some tips and tricks. This video is supported by FasCat Coaching, the experts in all types of bike racing and riding. All the coaches there raced or are currently racing at the professional level, and they can coach you in road, mountain bike, cyclocross, Strava, QM, hunting, doing group rides, and more. Now you can get coached like a pro with the FasCat app for less than $20 a month. This scales to your available time to train and comes with unlimited training plans. FasCat app includes auto FTP detection, custom workout recommendations, and instant workout analysis via the AI-powered CoachCat, which looks at not only your power, but also your wearable data if you use a Whoop, an Aura, or a Garmin watch. I've used FasCat training for more than a decade now, and I enjoy speaking to the coaches there and now CoachCat about questions I have about my own training. I encourage you to go check it out yourself. You can get a free month with no credit card required. Just click the link here or look in the description down below. Okay, now let's dig into the details of this new SRAM Red group, and then I'll give you my take on what I like and don't like. The lever is really the big story with the changes here, visually, ergonomically, and functionally. For starters, yes, it's longer and a little bit slimmer. And noticeably, what used to be this, huge chimney top is now much svelter, much more in line with, say, SRAM Force. The reason for that is the hydraulic cylinder moved from the top, where it was positioned vertically, to the hood body itself, where it's positioned horizontally. This is SRAM's first road hydraulic brake to have a push cylinder instead of the pull cylinder. That, combined with a new lever shape and position, now SRAM claims you can brake with 80% less force from the hoods and more than 30% in the drops. That's pretty massive and something that frankly I noticed. Often claims that can be measured in the lab, you can't really determine as a human on the road, but this is for sure noticeable. Another big change to the levers, visually, ergonomically, functionally, is the flare to the lever, which is in keeping with modern road levers. Pad adjust at the caliper is adjustable, as is reach adjust. That's a bit of a difference from past designs in that there's a little rubber grommet on the carbon, which you remove that and get in there, and let's see if I can do this without looking at it. So counterclockwise takes that in a fair amount. I've been riding it with the lever all the way out, which on this Envy bar in particular still leaves me, this is not how I ride, but with the curve at the bottom, that's still plenty of room, but if you've got smaller hands, that reach adjust is an option. Another change, the textured paddle, it's unidirectional, so when you're pressing this way, it doesn't give you much traction, but when you're pressing the other way, like when you're shifting, that's absolutely noticeable. What remains is both the tactile and the audio feedback to the shift. Then of course you've got the new bonus button, the thumb button. This is positioned similar to the Shimano GRX Di2 gravel group in that you shift with the thumb knuckle, not on the top the way Shimano's Dura-Ace and Ultegra Di2 groups do. So that's closer to where your thumbs, at least my thumbs, normally sit. Compared to those shifts that you can feel and hear, this is much more subtle. These buttons and the other shift buttons you can program to do what you like, whether that's shift or drive the Hammerhead computer. As of launch, I was unable to get these to drive a Wahoo or a Garmin, but SRAM says that should be coming any day now. So all sorts of changes with the lever. For the rest of the group, there are some tweaks, some modifications, some refinements. At the front derailleur, SRAM claims this is faster shifting. It's also a slightly narrower cage, and there's a wedge behind it to keep the thing from moving under shifts under pressure. Out back, the rear derailleur, as you can see, got a bit of sculpting, a lot of sculpting overall, whether that's at the caliper or the chain, not just the hollow pins, but the links themselves have been cleaned out, all sorts of space. You've got material and weight being taken off at the body of the derailleur, and then at the lower pulley, this may look like SRAM's mountain bike derailleur, which can rotate independently should a stick get caught in there. Here, that is not the case. This is just for looks only, so you can, I don't know, get extra grit and grime stuck in there. Also, I guess it looks cool, but this does not rotate independently. It's just a visual change and probably a fraction of a gram or two shaved off there. For the cassette, you've got 4 options. The 1028 and 1023 carry forward. You've also got a new 1030 and a 1036. Similarly, at the crank, lots of options. You've got 3 main styles that will come on stock bikes. Many of these bikes will be available in shops today. The 4835 is the most common. That's comparable if you're familiar with older style or Shimano style cranks. That is comparable to the 5236 or a subcompact. There's also a larger one and a smaller one that come on stock bikes. In addition to that, there are 3 aftermarket crankset options, aka pro versions. Those guys run from a 5239 all the way up to a 5643. Thing to remember with SRAM is that you've got the 10 tooth, which makes what sounds like perhaps a smaller big ring larger. So this 4810 is bigger than a 5211 for reference. Also, Quark integrated power meter can come on stock bikes. SRAM says for the red spec bikes, the majority of those come with an integrated power, which in my book is absolutely a positive thing, especially considering Quark is a solid, reliable meter. All that adds up to a group that weighs 2,496 grams. And it's a pretty real world weight in that they're not just using the smallest bits to weigh. So for instance, that includes a 4835 chainring combination, all the batteries, hoses, hydraulic fluid, mounting hardware. The only place where they, perhaps tightened it up a bit was measuring with a 1028 cassette, not the more common cassettes. But at 2,496 grams, that is, SRAM claims, the lightest electronic hydraulic road group on the market. So those are the details. Now here is my take on what the stuff feels like to use. In short, it's a big step forward, especially at the levers. And overall, I'm quite impressed with how they feel in my hands and how they feel braking and shifting. The 3 main jobs of levered. Feel good in the hand, shift well, brake well. The power, as I mentioned earlier, is quite noticeable. Being able to brake with, for me, my middle fingers went on the hoods and my index finger went in the drops. And one thing I notice when riding, particularly descending, like coming down the Colorado National Monument, diving through all these serpentine curves, is that a good group is like a good pair of bib shorts, in that you shouldn't be thinking about the stuff when you're riding. You should just be enjoying the ride. And just like you don't want to be wriggling around on the saddle thinking about how you're uncomfortable in your bibs, when you're coming into a corner, you shouldn't be thinking about, oh, I should probably brake sooner. It's a far cry from the battle days of carbon rim brakes, when you'd have to start thinking about braking well before the corners. You know, now just with a single finger on either side, there's plenty of power, and the modulation is good. Some folks ask how it compares to Campagnolo, which is the gold standard for some in terms of modulation. I would say the feel isn't quite there with Campy in terms of the progressive modulation, but the power absolutely is, and it's not like there's any stuttering in between. It's just not quite as silky smooth as Campy. Yes, the braking feels great, very light touch to activate, and after doing, I don't know, probably a cumulative 20,000 feet of descending, some on tight, windy, brake-heavy roads, I couldn't get the brakes to squawk or get that cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching the way you sometimes do after hard braking. So this is a big jump forward in my mind from the outgoing SRAM Red in terms of the brake performance. Shifting, I like how the texture feels, and it feels almost like grip tape when you're pushing slightly up, going against that grain. I like the auditory feedback. Can't always hear that on the road, but you can feel it a bit when shifting. I dig the thumb shifters for driving the computer. You can also set it to shift the rear derailleur. So for instance, if you want to shift the rear derailleur both directions with one hand, so you can be drinking from your bottle and shifting, you can do that too. Lastly, being able to get 3 and 4 fingers wrapped around the hood feels great to me. That's one of the things I noticed when going back to cable bikes, is that you just got a lot less room here because there's a lot more going on mechanically. So separate from the shifting, just the ergonomics, I prefer electronic groups, both Shimano and SRAM for that reason. Shifting under power. I shifted the front quite a bit while standing up, not necessarily doing a full sprint, but applying power, and it isn't lightning fast. There's a bit of a delay, but it didn't drop or stutter when I was going up or down while standing and climbing. That's a plus. Similarly, the back, that's never quite the same, high stakes when shifting under load as the front, but that also shifts just fine. Yeah, you can get it to make some noise if you're really torquing on the thing, but it shifts fine under power both ways. That's not something I necessarily recommend doing, but that's just a way to test. One thing I like about the SRAM system is you can swap the batteries between derailleurs, or should you have a dropper post or your buddy has a dropper post, you can swap there. Why would you need to swap? Because dead batteries are a thing, people. This applies to professional athletes, employees of this company, employees of Shimano, happens to everybody. And being able to swap should you need to is a positive thing. These rechargeable batteries last to claim 60 hours. They're the same batteries as all the rest of SRAM's AXS system. They charge pretty quickly. The shifters use a coin cell, the trusty 2032. These last to claim 2 years. Some of you may have experienced what happens when one of these goes out and that you can't shift here. A trick to help get you home is that you can press the button either on the front derailleur once to go in either direction, or at the rear, press it once, it'll take it down the cassette. 2 quick presses will take it up the cassette. So not an ideal situation, but if you're facing a big long climb and you need to rearrange, or you're going downhill, that's a way to configure the drivetrain when your shifters need a new one of these guys. Another thing I dig, integrated power meter that looks slick and, more critically, works very well. Also think it's great you've got 6 2x chainring options. There's also single ring options, and you've got 6 crank length options. Now here's what I do not like, and a thing I'm unsure about. Staying with these chain rings, I kind of dig the sculpted look. What I do not dig so much is the fact that the chain rings and the power meter are a one-piece thing. Now, some people have grumbled about, well, what happens when you wear out your chain rings? I don't think many people wear out chain rings. When's the last time you wore out chain rings? What I do have issue with is the fact that you just can't change the rings should a particular course you're doing or just a change in fitness or locale require it. So yeah, you could swap out the whole thing for a different chain ring set with a power meter, but to me that seems like maybe not a step backwards, but a step into a more confined box. I like this middle of the road 4835 paired with a 1033. That's been great for me in 98% of scenarios riding around Colorado where there's a lot of flat, but there's also a lot of up and a lot of downhill. Spun this out just maybe a handful of seconds, particularly riding with groups, down false flats with a tailwind behind. But all in all, 4835 with a 1033 is plenty of rope for me on both ends. One thing I'm unsure about is the future of these little rubber grommets on the lever. Will that become a little nuisance over time or pop out as it weathers? I don't know. I'm curious to see if this design will carry forward for years and years. As is, you have to really hunt for it when you're riding to feel it, but it's there. Not a negative, not a positive, just a wait and see on that. The aesthetics of the group. Certainly a lot of silver, a lot of machining, a lot of hollowing out, a lot of shaving of the material and weight going on. I think it looks good. Your call. I'm not going to tell you what you think of how the thing looks. Bottom line, it's a pretty good group, as it should be for the top end of the range. Lots of changes going on with the levers, and they're almost all, in my opinion, quite positive. I'm going to be doing a head-to-head test video with SRAM Red and Shimano Dura-Ace, the corresponding group from the competition. As for pricing, that obviously depends on the market and on the bikes that it's coming on, but you can expect these on the top end bikes for sure. Let me know what questions you have. I will answer those as best I can in the comments below and in subsequent videos I do on this group. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And whether you're a SRAM person, a Shimano person, or even a Camp and Yellow person, they still exist. Talk to Jim Potter. I hope you enjoy the ride. See you next time.